Let's go. Okay, awesome. Okay, so we're live on YouTube, Alanna. 6 minutes late.
Hello.
Whew. Welcome. Hello, everybody. I was sweating earlier because I was like trying to get things to work in such a smooth way. And Alanna, fortunately, has done this before, so she's very gracious with me. So, hey, Alanna, really good to have you on the TapTapKaboom podcast, the TapTapKaboom show. I would like to ask you a kickoff question. So you walk into an event, maybe it's a coffee place, maybe it's a conference, and people are like, "Hey, who are you and what do you do?" How would you answer something like that?
Well, first of all, hello, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here with you. It's one of those challenging questions because I feel like I wear many hats, but the first thing that I think I would say is that I'm an artist, and I'm also someone that doesn't necessarily follow the rules. So I tend to be a little bit of a mischievous, rule breaker.
I like
But
that.
as far as the, we always have to like push the boundaries and the envelope, right? And I think that kind of walks hand in hand with what I'm going to tell you next, because I'm a fiber artist, so I tend to work with materials like wool and yarn and fabric and in making my art, but I'm also an AI artist. And so those two worlds are not necessarily like in conflict with each other, but they're definitely opposite ends, right? So I tend to enjoy the digital as well as the analog. And there's not many people that have a foot in both worlds. So, I'm a little bit of a rebel in that way as well.
I mean, I can imagine whatever you say, like if you're going to say fiber art, I'd be like, what is that? I can imagine a lot of people are like, what is that? And then if you say AI art, like I think that's got a lot more attention and people may understand what that means because they can be like, I've done some AI art myself, But in terms of fiber art, like in my mind, I'm thinking like how does this, like who do you hang out with? Like where did you learn? Like what is it? I just have all of these questions, because I get it. Like, I don't know how to do fiber art at all. Like, would my mother-in-law knitting be considered fiber art, or is that like step down the line? Like what kind of questions do people start asking, and how do you answer them?
Yeah, well, I mean, you raise a bunch of wonderful questions, and I think no, and I think they're great because just historically, right? Like, even is knitting considered art? And I think another hat that I wear in talking to people is that I'm an educator and a teacher. And one of the lessons that I would love to start the year off with my students, or any class that I'm teaching that is art related, is really to ask people, what is the difference between art and craft? And the idea of being an artist to me is a blend of craftsmanship. So you have to know how to use a material or a medium and have skill with it, right? Like you have to be able to um, do something with a physical medium of in some type of way. You have to have knowledge of that. But then the other part of art to me is the idea and the concept behind it and the way you execute it and the human expression that goes into it. So oftentimes when I'm hanging out with my people, as you say, where do I find these people? I can get into that. But when I'm hanging out with fiber people, oftentimes there will be a lot of people that will design their own patterns, that will make up their own unique hats, that will spin their own yarn, that will dye them. They'll do everything from scratch, right? And they don't necessarily consider themselves to be an artist because the way that they created, they might have learned knitting or crocheting, like you said, through a pattern. And so the idea of following a pattern is like following a recipe. So when you're doing that, to me, that's more under the umbrella of craft, right? Where you're opening up like a kit and you're following in a paint by number might be, the realm of craft. But
Yeah.
if you then take the yarn and you just start making something, if you have an idea, like if you want to make like a stuffed animal, for example, And you decide, okay, I want to make a unicorn, and you try to figure out, how do I construct a horn that's made out of yarn, and you start figuring out, how do you apply your skills of knowing crochet, for example, to this horn construction way. You're creating art, you're creating a soft sculpture, fiber art. But people that do that don't necessarily consider themselves to be artists. They'll almost downplay their ability to create something out of nothing. And so that kind of makes me sad. But where did I get mixed up with this crowd, or these type of people? Well, when I was little, I really enjoyed, believe it or not, untangling yarn. And my grandmother, she was into knitting and crocheting and doing needlepoint, and I would love to watch her. But we would go to bakeries, and they would have the baker's twine that was like wrapped around the bakery boxes, and I would love to like untangle the string. And I found, as someone that also has ADHD, that might be something else you might hear me letting people know as I introduce myself, that I find that the tactile input in working with fiber really calms my mind and really gets me to a place where my brain goes quiet. So before being diagnosed, as a coping mechanism with like stress and life and all of that, trying to figure out how to harness my superpowers before knowing that that's what they were, touching thread, working with thread really calmed me, and it was where I would hyperfixate and spend my time. So that's kind of where I started early on, and I've just been kind of going down all of the different rabbit holes after learning how to use kits and things. Like, well, wait, I can make my own yarn, and oh wait, I can make my own cloth, I can make my own fabric. And so it kind of just snowballed from there.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it unravels from there, because that would have been a really great pun. Yeah. Come on, you must have used that like tons of times, right?
Of course, yeah.
Oh man, so
it's all woven together.
yeah, so good. Oh man, like I have so many questions. So before this call, Alanna and I were chatting, and she was showing me a bunch of stuff. So can you just show me that again? Like, I had this question, like, so where does this come from? Like at what point do you get involved? Like, there's a sheep. Like, can you take us? Oh yeah, so there's a sheep, but like you were like, there are silkworms and there are rabbits and bunnies, and like, can you take us back there? Like, how do we get from there to where you are? And yeah, what's the process?
Sure. Well, it's interesting because I think that there's really been a lot more interest in where people's clothing comes from, right? And how clothing is manufactured, and just the whole process of being environmentally friendly, and just really trying to think about how what we wear and what we use is just more ecologically friendly. And so there's been a lot more interest, I think, in seeing the process from start to finish. So if you're someone that's interested in knowing, for example, how a wool hat came to be, what would start in the process of actually constructing yarn is you'd have to start off with a fiber, and there's lots of different fibers. So you can have man-made ones that are synthetics, like you might be familiar with, like polyester and nylon. There's plant fibers like linen that comes from flax and cotton, but then you also have protein fibers. So that comes from things like sheep, and rabbits have Angora fur. And so one of the fibers that I like to work with is wool. It's just one of the easiest and the nicest ones to spin and turn into yarn. And so the way that it would start is that you would be like a shepherd, for example, or you would maybe go to a shepherd and get a fleece from them. So that would basically be when the sheep gets a haircut. And so I had a little sample of fiber over here of a fleece. So you can see this is like a lock of wool. So this would be what the hair would look like if it's getting cut off the sheep. And at this point, it's kind of greasy. It's got lanolin in it. So if you've ever used hand lotion, one of the ingredients of lanolin, it's like really good for your skin. So part of the byproduct of processing fleece will be the removal of the lanolin from the fiber, so that it's spinnable for the machines. And so then it gets extracted and it becomes like a beauty product, or something that is now sold in like the beauty industry, right? For like like chapstick and things like that, lotions. Okay. So anyway, so the fiber.
Do you do that if you're like a solo fiber artist? Do you also remove the lanolin?
Yes, you would wash it. I mean, like different people have different processes. Like some people like to leave the grease in because then it makes the fiber more waterproof. And so there might be
Mm,
fisherman sweaters
okay.
that they'll actually want that as a quality in there because it makes it more waterproof. But I prefer to get rid of all of the dirt and stuff out. And then once you have clean fiber, you can then, tease it open and it just becomes almost like a little cloud of fluff. And at this stage, I would then take it and either dye it. I would put it in a dye pot and I would go into my studio, a la Walter White. I go into the basement. I have my gas mask on. I have my white scientist, lab coat, and I go in, and really do my chemistry and my magic there. So I call that my color alchemy, and I'll dye the fiber. And then after I dye the fiber, I'll then go to spin it. But this fiber is dyed. It's just straight off the sheep. But I have different tools that I'll use, and one of them for spinning or turning fiber into yarn is this. It's a very primitive tool. It's called a drop spindle. And
Yeah.
basically, it's just like a dowel, and it's like a top that has centrifugal motion in. And the act of turning fiber into yarn is physics. And so basically, it's the stored twist energy in the fiber that holds it together. So the way that it works is I'll take the dowel and I'll spin it in the clockwise direction. And you'll see that there is twist energy that gets stored because there's like these little kinks and coils that will form in the fiber. And
Yeah.
if I pinch where the twist ends and I pull and draft or elongate and attenuate the fiber out, as you were saying when I was doing the demonstration off camera, that it almost looks like cotton candy or floss, like or candy floss, you said, but it basically will travel up, and so the twist is what's holding the fibers together. So there's no glue, there's nothing other than twist that's holding it together. It's just stored twist energy. And if I take the yarn and I fold it back on itself like this, so there's two strands, the twist energy wants to be neutralized. So it'll go in the opposite direction. And so you'll see that there'll be these like two strands going against each other. So kind of, if I can go up to the camera, there we go. Okay, there you go. So you can see that it kind of makes it like a strand of yarn that you might see like in a store. And then I'll do different stuff with this. I'll weave with it, I'll knit with it, and I'll make different things. Like this is, I know, one of your favorites here. This Viking. Well, I know it's not authentic, the horns on the Viking helmets, but I made one with horns anyway. And so this is
Oh, I love
something
this
that like
thing.
I spun the yarn. Yeah.
Man,
I
it's
can put it on here. Let's see. I don't know if
okay, cool. While you're putting it on, like I find that's fascinating. Like I had no idea, like where it came. Like how awesome does that look? Like I mean, it must be really hot. Like it's hot here. That's why one of the reasons I was sweating. But is it warm? You said like that it's made from rabbit hair, the beard. That's so cool.
Yes, it's got Angora fiber in it, and it's also got wool too, But yes, it's a blend
Oh
of different
man.
fibers for warmth, and it does pop up, so it's a quick way to shave. You just pop your beard over your head, and
Yeah,
yeah.
man, it's so cool. Okay, so like, at what point do you get your fiber or your wool? Like, do you go get sheep? What is it called? Like wool
A fleece.
and
Yeah. So I mean,
fleece,
well,
and then,
it's interesting.
or I mean, do you have
Yeah,
sheep? Like,
no.
okay, so
I have cats, and I've actually spun their fiber into yarn. That was actually how I got into spinning. I wanted to make embroidery floss for crazy quilts that I was embroidering, and I wanted to see if I could take my cat's fur and turn it into yarn. And so I went to a local spinners guild, and then they taught me, how to basically do that. But no, I don't personally have
what?
sheep, but they have a lot of what they call fiber festivals. So it's
Okay,
basically, where you have, um, the people that like to dress up like a Comic-Con, and like that, they have all those different types of conventions. So it's basically like a convention, if you will, but for people that love spinning yarn, knitting, all the fiber arts. And we
yeah,
get together usually like in the fall or the spring, and there'll be workshops, there'll be fiber vendors, the people that sell the yarn, the fiber. And so they'll bring everything. They even have the sheepdogs will come out, and they'll do the sheepdog trial, so you can like watch the
Okay.
shepherds and their sheepdogs. So it's like a whole cool thing, to experience. So usually I'll go and I'll get my fiber and my supplies from the festivals or online. That's a great place now these days, right? You just go online.
And like, how clean do you get it? So you mentioned like taking out the dirt, taking out the stuff. Like, do you get it dirty, or can you like opt to get it dirty or clean, or like what stage do you get it?
You can pick whatever part you want. Generally, because I am a dyer, I like to get it when it's cleaned and white and ready to go into the dye pot, and then I'll apply color so that I can have really a lot of control. So I don't know if you would like to see. Now I can put some artwork just to show you an example. Okay, so one of the first things, because I went through this program, believe it or not, you can go to become a master spinner, and so that was about a 10-year program that I went through, and this was the first year. This was the first year assignment. We had to make a project with our yarn, and I was a little bit overachiever here, but I took the picture that's on the right of the sunset, and I wanted to see, could I make that translated into these gloves? So the mittens that you see on the left are actually gloves that I made from fiber that I dyed and spun and knitted to match the sunset.
Wow, that's ridiculous. And so just so that everyone knows, like if you're listening to this, there's going to be a URL to go check out the slides. It's a bit link or bit.ly. So if you want to follow along visually, just check out the show notes, and I'll also put into the YouTube description. But if you're watching on YouTube now, you can check it out. So like this is crazy. So like you just made that. How? Like, did you follow a pattern? Like, how does that even work? Like, please show us again.
So basically, it started. Yeah, sure. So it basically started with raw fiber. So I started with like the grease fleece, right? Like it was the raw fleece. I washed the fleece, and then I dyed like little chunks of the fleece different colors. So I dyed some of it orange, some of it brown, some of it pink and purple. And what I did, and this is basically this color dyeing matching process that I call color alchemy that I developed, where I take digital hex color codes. And this is kind of where again, when I was saying I'm a bit of a rebel, or that I like to live in both the analog and the digital worlds, where I take digital hex colors like from this picture, and then I turn them and transform them into dye formulas, so that I can almost act like how a printer does when it sees, a cornflake on the screen, and then you say to the printer, okay, print this picture of the cornflake, and it looks like a cornflake. So I do that with my dyes, where if I see the picture of the sunset, I then translate the hex color codes into dye formula, and I dyed up a whole bunch of the different colors on different wools, and then I blend them together using different tools. I spun up the yarns, and then I knitted them following a pattern, and I placed the colors based on where they were in the picture with the yarns that I dyed. So, and I think I have them. I can see if I can go grab them if you want to actually see the real deal.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Like, how many colors went into those gloves, though? Like
about 15 actually. Here, if you give me 1 second, I'm just going to see if I can open up. I have, if you give me 1 second, I have like a little. I know we're on the clock now, but I have like a whole. Okay, hang on. Let me see if I can pull it out of the depths here. But I have a little book that I put together that basically shows, oh, here we go, okay. That shows like all of the steps. You can actually see the process, right? So, okay, here we go. So all of these swatches, because you wanted to know how many colors, these were all of the samples of the colors that got used. So like each one was like a separate lock of wool that, I dyed all of these colors. And then I did swatches, right? So I went to see how it would look. I don't know if you can see over here. So I had to do like knitting swatches to test it out. And this was all my coursework, right? So I had to do like all of this as like a homework assignment, basically, to get this master spinner certificate. So it was a lot of work and a lot of time and effort that went into this. But yeah.
Wow, that's
it took about 115 hours. I had to document it from start to finish.
Oh, man, that's amazing. Like, I'm just thinking, like, in
Thank you.
terms of like, for me, doing pixel art is like
Yes.
painful. You know, this is like pixel
Yes.
art on steroids because you have to do a whole bunch of pre-work and you have to have knowledge, and then you have to like make it into gloves or whatever you want to, you know, create from it. Like,
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
like I'm thinking like this is going to take a long time to make anything, but also like you
Yes.
mentioned ADHD, and
Hmm.
having a calming effect on your mind. Like earlier you showed me
Hmm.
that brush thing, and I was like, well, is it therapeutic, is it cathartic? Like how long do you spend in
Yes.
catharsis mode, like doing these repetitive rhythmical movements and actions?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, right, any kind of like thing that you might know of about like the fiber arts, like if you think of knitting or whatever, maybe you've seen poorly represented too, but in cartoons or movies, right, like the knitting needles and how a person is like holding them, or if you've seen someone crocheting, it's very repetitive. The act of using a loom, right, that it's, you know, going back and forth with the beater and the shuttle is flying back and forth. So stitching, embroidery, quilting, all of that is very repetitive. And you know, the thing too that's really interesting about the fiber arts, and traditionally that it tends to be more of a female dominated you know, medium or use, and also with women being underdiagnosed with ADHD, and like a lot more
Yeah.
diagnoses is like are happening later in life for women, that you know, it's not surprising that there are a lot of women in the fiber arts that have ADHD or identify as having ADHD symptoms, because that you know, it is very calming. It is very soothing for the mind to go quiet. And those, it's really interesting, just the correlations that I've noticed in the people that I've worked with, that say that, you know, oftentimes if you ask them, what are you going to do with the yarn that you make, and they'll say, I don't know, it just relaxes me, I just enjoy making it. And so it's the meditative quality comes from keeping a beat, keeping a rhythm, you know, the movement of using your hands, feeling the tactile qualities of the fiber, and then you're actually seeing something that's made, right? Whereas a lot of times if you're on your phone and you're doom scrolling or and all of that, that's still that kind of repetitive zoning out that might happen, but you don't have anything physically to show for it. And all of the time that I've spent in quote unquote downtime, whether it was social anxiety at a party, or like at a restaurant waiting for food to come, or a doctor's office, or anywhere
Yeah.
that my hands needed to fidget, like a meeting, right? I've channeled that into the things that I've created. And so what I have is really like visual representations, not only of time passing, but it's also of my channeled social anxiety.
Wow. That's like really deep. Like when you were talking earlier about art, like, yeah, man, that's where it gets like, oh, yeah, that's clearly art now because it's a comment on, I don't know, like something more than just craft, right? It's going deeper.
Hmm.
It's something
Exactly.
personal. And when you start to represent that, either visually or when people look below or underneath or, you know, beyond just what they see, they get to see that. And that's like, it's poetic, it's beautiful. And when you're doing the act, are you listening to music or is it just quiet? Or could you be in a loud environment and you're just super focused on this like repetitive movement?
Yeah, you know, I think if you think of it almost like, you know, fidget spinners, right? Like some people in the spinning community will refer to this as like the original fidget spinner. Um,
Yeah.
but I think the idea of doing something to channel whatever that nervous, anxious energy is, and finding people who accept that it's not like you're being rude, that you're actually doing something with your hands to help you focus and pay attention and listen to them. So oftentimes I'll say to people, you know, I'm doing this so that I can pay attention to you better and I can actually like process and hear your words better. Like I need to get out of my body, my brain overthinking, so that I have room and space in it to hear you. So like if
Yeah.
I'm making something, it just allows me to connect with people more. Otherwise, I'm so in my head that it requires like a lot of effort to, you know, make that connection with people.
Yeah, I mean, like I have ADHD, and honestly, sometimes I can be talking to somebody or listening or that's my role in the conversation. But I'm having like one or more conversations in my head, or I'm thinking about stuff, and then they'll like ask me a question. I'm like, so what now? Like
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't been paying attention, and now I can't ask you anything because I don't know what you have or haven't told me. So I'll be like, oh, okay, bye, you know. And so like
Yeah.
in
And I,
meetings, in church, or like whatever, I've always been doodling. Like I don't really have fidget spinners. Like now I've got this little pen and I'm just spinning it around my fingers. Like I got pretty good at that, and I've got a pad in front of me, like writing down some notes and questions. But I think if somebody had to like pull out knitting needles or whatever tools you have, or even your hands, and start doing stuff, I'd be like, are you listening? Are you listening? But it's really helpful to be like, I am listening. I want to listen to you. That's why I'm doing this. Just, you know.
yeah, yeah. And I think again, there's this, social piece of how do we make people feel welcome, at the table too. And I'm sure when people look at your doodles and your art, they might either see it as you daydreaming. And if you think of like
Oh, yeah.
how many pages in your notebooks at school might be filled with drawings, right? And it's like
So many.
those
Yeah.
might be, yeah, and those might be the classes or the topics that were really hard for you to pay attention to, but you were able to pass or at least absorb some information because you were able to keep your mind like grounded in something. Whereas if you didn't, if you were told you are not allowed to doodle in school, like that, you were getting get in trouble or whatever, you probably would, either fail more, and or you might even feel like there's something wrong with you, or you start to get like a negative self-image, like why can't I focus, like all of these negative things. Whereas like, no, I'm really doing the thing because I'm trying to focus right now. And being able to see the way that we navigate in this world as artists maybe gets rewarded sometimes, like, oh wow, you're so talented, you can draw, you can make this wonderful art. And it's like, well, this is a survival, but this is like a survival coping mechanism.
Wow, yeah.
It's not necessarily something that I'm doing for the fun of it. Now there are times maybe where I of course make art for fun, but more often than not I feel like it's what I need to survive.
My mind is like, it's going back to like all these school interactions that I had, like with teachers. I got diagnosed when I was like 6 or 7 that I had ADD.
Okay.
So it didn't represent as me like, woo, like let's go like pick up things and I can't sit in my chair. I would probably look like the model student, but in my brain it's just like telling stories, imagining things, and they're like, yo, Rich, like you haven't finished your work. And I'm like, oh, what? Like, excuse me? And I remember like in a geography class when I was 16 or 17 or something, this teacher was like, hey, Armstrong, what you doing in this? You should be taking notes, man. What are you doing? What are these drawings? And I was like, I don't know, I'm listening, sir. Like, I'm listening. And he was just like really frustrated with me, But then when you talked about survival, like I've been doodling pretty much like almost like only doodling when there's something else going on, like in meetings, or I spent a lot of my life in churches, like drawing and doodling, like in very little time doing art for art's sake. And it's kind of like funny now. I'm like, am I meant to be an artist, or is this just like my hobby? Like, is this my play? Is this my survival mechanism? Is this how I cope? And if I do this, like, what else am I meant to be doing? Like, I understand that I could, be an artist and doodle as like a survival thing, but I'm just like, oh, wow, like how many other people are exactly like that? And we put so much pressure on people. Like, imagine like this is your survival thing. You're like, okay, now I see you're good with wool. You should be a professional fiber artist or whatever else. There must be tons of other stuff that you can become. Excuse my ignorance here, but I'm just like, whoa, like what if you wanted to be a computer programmer or an engineer or a doctor? But this is just what you do a lot of because this is how you survive or how you concentrate,
Yeah, well, and it can go both ways too, right? It can go where you feel like you weren't able to be successful because for myself, I wasn't diagnosed until my late 30s. So
Oh,
I went,
wow.
all
Sheesh.
from kindergarten through getting a master's, not medicated, not knowing that I had it, thinking that as a female, it was more hormonal. It was maybe something to do with like my cycle or something. Maybe I was
Yeah.
just like super emotional. I had no idea. No one in my family was diagnosed. It just wasn't a thing. And
Yeah.
so, you know, and I did really well in school academically, but it struggled and it really required a lot of, you know, a lot more effort than my peers. And if I was told that I could do art for a living and that was encouraged, then I would feel like this is the thing that I could be successful at. But I was told that I was really good at it, but like I have to pursue something else. And I felt like,
Hmm.
what else can I do? So I went into teaching art because I didn't
Okay.
really know what else could I do. Like in hindsight, I probably would have been a phenomenal engineer, but I can't remember words and I can't hold on to
Hmm.
like formulas and things like that. But like conceptually, if you give me a problem, like if you said, okay, we need to build like a bridge or whatever and figure out how to do it, and these are the problems, I could probably come up with like 20 different solutions for you, not really understanding all of the aspects, for example, of like what an engineer might like have to go through mathematically to make it, but like on a team to be with engineers creatively as that artist, quote unquote, I could come up with like so many solutions. So I think the fact that creativity also isn't nurtured in school outside of art classes, like if you think of a class
Yeah.
like math, for example, right? Like
Oh,
you can
yeah.
teach creativity in math. So like instead of saying, the answer has to be 4, when you say, the question is 2 plus 2. If you said something to someone like myself that said, I want you to give me as many mathematical problems that the answer is going to give you 4, and I want it to be either arithmetic, subtraction, whatever, I would be so excited because now my creativity would be like, great, I can come up with like 30 different math problems for you, right? But
Yeah.
it would demonstrate my understanding of addition, of how to get there in a way that would speak to me. And so because those creative paths are not pursued and that's not encouraged, right, to teach creativity, it feels like there's very little room for people like us, I think personally, just my experience, that to feel successful in the way that education is traditionally set up.
Oh man, I think we could do like an entire episode on education because I went to a boys' boarding school. I always went to boys' schools. And I remember when I got out of school and I went to college or like
Mhm.
university, I was all of a sudden, firstly, like in a co-ed like learning situation, I didn't have a uniform. And my art class that I was in, I was drawing charcoal. And I was like, whoa, this is so good. And I remember the first time that like other people presented, there was like sculptures and like wall and installment art and like music. And I was like, what is this? Like, I didn't get taught
Yeah,
any of
yeah.
this. Like, I got taught how to draw and how to use pastels. And I stopped that. I rebelled out of that because I hated it. And I did screen printing, which was amazing because I could design one thing and then print like 100 if I wanted to. And I was like, yes, I love this. So like the entrepreneur in me loved that. The lazy person in me loved that. The person who was like, oh, I get to use something like Photoshop. It wasn't, but it was the closest thing that I even understood to be like Photoshop then. It was that. It was super cool. And then you're like, what about like wool and sheep and looming and weaving and all these other words you've used? I'm like,
Hmm.
they did not teach us that at all. They did not teach us about a whole bunch
Hmm.
of stuff at this school. And sure, maybe they can't teach you everything, but they didn't even like mention
Sure.
it. Or maybe they did. I
Exposure.
don't
Yeah.
know.
Hmm.
And I was like, I
Hmm.
don't care about wool and sheep. Like,
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
give me something else. I want to, go play rugby. But it's like you got your master's in teaching art. Is that
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, so I
Is that
have
what you got your
a master's in art education, and then I
art
also went for
education?
that master's spinner certificate. Yep.
Okay, so and then who do you teach? Do you teach kids or do you teach adults or both?
Well, so for 16 years, I was in the public school system. I was teaching high school studio and art, drawing and painting, those classes. And then after COVID, I really love teaching virtually. I love teaching via Zoom and also to teach at these wool and fiber festivals. So I'll go
Okay,
and I'll teach in
okay, hold
person
on, hold
there.
on, hold on. Let's go back to school because this, like,
Okay.
it fascinates me. Like, having your understanding of ADHD, of creativity,
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
you're a practicing artist who is now also teaching. Like, what does teaching art to kids look like? My wife was a teacher, but she taught up to like age 12, and
Hmm.
sometimes like 5, 6 year olds, and in between. Like, what did that look like for you? How did you try and encourage creativity outside of the art room or the art studio? Did you, or could
Well,
you?
yeah, yeah, and it's interesting why I went into education because, like how you said, when with your experience going from the boarding school to, kind of having this exposure now at college, and it was a real eye-opening
Yeah, it
experience for
was.
you that there's not only other ways of learning, but what one is exposed to and how I want to say that there's almost like a love of learning. I think that especially that comes with like hyperfixation and people that I've encountered with ADHD, that we love to learn. So it's not
Yeah,
like we don't have the ability to, learn and absorb things. We want to learn what interests us, right? We want to hyperfixate on the things that we find interesting. Maybe not what you're trying to teach me is interesting. Um, and
yeah,
but what I found was when I was little, I went to a private school, a religious private school, and then I went to a public school in Brooklyn. So that dynamic was really different. And then I went from an inner city public school to a very wealthy suburban high school, and seeing how those three different schools like both treated the students, how they viewed and treated education, and just the access to resources that each one had made me really n- not only notice and experience the discrepancy and the unfair advantage, just like where one lives geographically, and what how that sets them up for success. But I felt like if you are in a place where there are a lack of resources, like you should have even more with education, right? And there's this fallacy that if you just
mm,
do well in school, you'll be successful. Well, what if your school doesn't have the computers and the equipment and the money and all of that, that the school just down the road does, because they have access to resources. So it was really
yeah,
important to me to create these very like authentic learning experiences, that while art was maybe what I was teaching, it wasn't the thing that I was teaching. I really wanted to teach things like resiliency, resourcefulness, how to go outside the box of what you were told you were capable of, and just seeing how far you could push yourself. And so when I was teaching, I had a very different approach. Like, you could just give me a paper and pencil, and I would take it to the a whole new place, not just giving people a still life thing to draw every day, and being there. So I think just what my focus was as a teacher just naturally lent itself and guided itself to doing things differently. So even with Zoom, right, I was so excited to have this new way of teaching students creativity and art from home. And all of
yeah,
the art teachers were like so flustered. They're like, how am I supposed to teach? I don't have materials. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is the perfect time to show students that it doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter what you have access to, that they can be creative. So, like, for example, we were getting a whole bunch of like catalogs coming in for like Christmas, the flyers and all of the junk mail is coming in. And I said to the
yeah,
students, okay, I want you to create a collage using your junk mail. I said, I want you to go find like a painting online or like a work of art online and try to like recreate it with like objects that you have in your house. I want you to go outside on a nature walk and, using the elements and principles of art, try to like arrange objects that you find on your walk in such a way that shows movement, that shows unity, so like getting them to see that it doesn't necessarily have to be where we're in an art classroom for you to make art, and to empower them to think and to know that they're creative individuals. And it was it was a shame because I was feeling so like sparked with like energy and electricity and a love of this opportunity to really get people to see how creative they could be, and
Yeah.
that the art teachers were like lamenting not having access to the materials, and that, you know, there was this like sadness, and it's like, no, you don't understand, like this is our opportunity, you know. And it just felt like, yeah, that's, I guess, how, I mean, I'm a rebel, you know. I see challenges like that and I get excited.
Yeah, I mean, you would hope like your art teacher is going to be the one who is the most creative, or the one who's going to challenge you the most, or get your creativity sparked up. You know, like the whole thing here is TapTapKaboom. Like, it's what I want to do. I want to unleash people's creativity. And so chatting to an art teacher who thinks like that is awesome. But maybe like it's just an ADHD thing. I don't know. Like, I haven't met that many people in the world who are art teachers or who are enthused about creativity. But like everything that you've said about ADHD, I'm like, yep, that's me. Like, I love to learn. Like, it has to be like what I want to learn. You know, like I can get hyperfixated on stuff. And every time somebody's like, am I ADHD? I'm like, okay, here's a couple of things. Like, do you love learning? Like, do you just like zone in and just like smash one thing that you're into? And do you have like a litany of stuff that you're like, yeah, I got that, but now I'm done with that. Like, just a whole bunch of projects, a whole bunch of like skills that you're like, that was cool, but now I'm onto something else. And they're like, yeah.
But the thing is that it's not okay. So this is really important, right? And let me know if I'm hitting the mark with you on this too. It's not that we don't have the ability to finish something. It's the fact that the reason that we got into making the thing was because of our love of learning, and that when we stop working on a project, it's because we feel that we've mastered all of the skills needed to complete it. So if you feel like you've mastered the skills needed to complete it early on, then maybe you stop at 25% done. If it's something that challenges you up to the end, then you'll finish it because you were engaged all the way through. And so, you know, giving yourself permission to just work on something until you feel that you learned it, and like releasing it and letting it go and saying, you know what, I don't have to finish this. This is not what the joy was for me in having a finished thing. It was in the learning how to do the thing. And when you like look at your stuff that way, it's just such a freedom of like, oh, like I acquired learning. It didn't have to be a finished project. It's such a freeing, I don't know. I think it's a freeing thing.
Well, I think it's like a really interesting thing. I'm reading this book called Play It Away, and this guy's cure to anxiety, his anxiety, is to play. And as a grown man, like, it's kind of weird to play. Like, maybe you could play some sport or maybe like an Xbox, but he's like, hey, instead of having a meeting with a bud, like, we went to go, you know, throw a ball or play catch in the park, or throw a frisbee. And I'm like, oh, wow, like, that's pretty cool. But when you're talking about learning, I'm like, oh, as an ADHD person, this is a form of play. It's enjoyment. Like, some people love gaming. Some people love playing sport. Some people like are on their phones doing stuff. Like, it's their sense of enjoyment. And sometimes I feel like a little bit guilty, maybe being like, well, I'm learning something else, you know, and sometimes it's quite close to what I do for work, or I'm learning about AI. I'm learning how to animate something. I'm learning this new app. Like, I'm always learning something. Like, I have books open everywhere. And sometimes I've stopped reading those books because I got what they wanted to say, like you said. And cool, now I want to the next thing. And it's like, oh, like, could I do this more intentionally? Like, let's learn something outside of my comfort zone. Like, I want to learn how to cook something. I don't know what it could be. Or I want to learn how to make a bay window. Like, what do I need to know? Like, let's hyperfixate on this and make it further removed from computers and art. Like, because that's just like my realm of interest, you know?
Yeah, well, and I think what...
Sorry, I'm just noticing your
that's
cat.
Willie Nelson.
Like, what's up, cat?
That's Willie Nelson. He's he's okay. He's just cleaning himself. Looking for some privacy. But yeah, no, I think it's really something that's important, that, you know, if you enjoy learning something, that it's okay to just stop working on something. And I think that's the same thing with AI, right? Like, there's stuff that's coming out all of the time that it's actually overwhelming to keep up with the learning needed to be able to do it. And so like I'm in a place where I feel like technology wise, I'm 1,000 years behind with my animations, because it's just so overwhelming to know what is the new software to use, what is the new way to, use the technology, that I actually want to just have time where I'm enjoying making the thing instead of learning. Like that's how fast AI is coming
Oh,
out, that I just actually want to have time to make something.
I mean, I keep on telling people, yeah, I'm going to get into AI, and then I'm like, oh, hold on, like it just keeps on, like it changes almost too quickly.
It's too fast. Yes.
And I'm like, but where do I start? Like I read this article and it's really outdated. Like
Exactly.
So I would just have these like maybe three newsletters coming in, and just the amount of stuff on a daily basis that came in. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I'm getting overwhelmed, and I haven't even started anything, And we've got like, I'm going to say 15 minutes if you're okay with going over a little bit, because we started late.
Sure.
But like, I finally got something. So I bought this book. It's called Spells.
Okay.
And the idea is,
whoa, that's a big book.
Yes, it's pretty big. But like, I'll show you what's in it. But it says any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So like, imagine a shower. If you've never seen a shower, you'd be like, this, or running water, or like, you'd see a TV and be like, what is that thing? And you see people in the TV like, oh, there's small people in there. How do we get them up? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it'd just be bizarre.
Yeah.
And so this is what AI is. It's basically magic. So all this book is, it's a compilation of AI artists. And there's like a prompt on one side and the image it produced on the other side. And
wow.
At some point, I'm going to get a subscription to Midjourney and just start trying out some of these prompts, just to be like, okay, like let's learn. And a lot of this stuff is not like any of the other AI art I've seen, because I'm pretty good at spotting AI art. It's like, like that could be a photo, that could be, and stuff like this.
Yeah, the point we're getting to, where it's going to be difficult to tell the difference. Obviously, it's getting closer and closer to that. So I definitely think it's going to be the idea or the concept that you're trying to communicate. Is going to be what really makes it stand out more, as opposed to just being a pretty picture.
And so, like, I want to dive into your AI art stuff now,
sure.
And the reason why I was fascinated. How I first got into your AI art was you had this collection where there was just a bunch of blunders. And I've tried AI stuff, and I'm like, this sucks. There's so much suckage of it or in it. But you made a collection, an NFT collection with like really funny stuff. And I was like, this is really like, it's interesting. Again, it felt more like art again, because there was this theme. It was funny. And it wasn't just like, oh yeah, that's AI art. It was like, oh, this computer made a mistake, which you would assume like computers can't really do because they're AI. And I'm just like, that's amazing. And then I like look further into your work, and I'm like, how is this possible? Like, there's 5. It looks furry. What? I don't understand. And that's when my brain was like, oh, is this just crazy cool stuff? Or like, how much input did Alanna have in this? Could I do something like that? Or like, so can you explain like the overlap between AI and fiber art? Because you have this big history in fiber art and art education. And now there's this new thing called AI. So how did that begin? How does the overlap work?
Yeah, so like here, I'm showing some of my more cute, or the more adorable AI pieces, but you can see that the textural quality of them, right, is pulling in. As a teacher, I'm going to say my vocabulary words, but like the words that are related to the fiber arts. So describing the surface texture, the aesthetic that I want, all of the words that I'm using in my prompts are informing the overall aesthetic quality that I want. And because I'm trying to capture my cat Glenn, who's in the top middle with me, you know, it's also the words that I'm using too, right? So he's kind of a curmudgeon, grumpy cat, so I'm trying to use, you know, those words as well, and being playful with it. But to
Okay.
answer like how did yeah.
So here, unless like one, you know the kind of cat it is, and unless you have the vocabulary to describe what you want, like you'd be screwed. Like I wouldn't be able to do this. I'd be like fluffy. Maybe I could be like knitted. Like those are the words that come to my mind.
Exactly.
Like, what words are you using for these images? Yeah.
So really, you know, what I want you to think about is, how would you describe the scene to someone that couldn't see the image, right? So like if, you know, you're playing a game and the person can't see it, how would you describe it? So, you know, I would say that like my cat, he's got curly fur, so that the breed is a Selkirk Rex. So I'd say, you know, a gray Selkirk Rex with yellow eyes, you know, making a grumpy expression, and the surface texture is, you know, made of wool felt. And, you know, just the other words that I would be putting in that would give it my, you know, quote unquote signature aesthetic. But the one thing that I don't do, especially with AI and the whole, you know, moral kind of debate about, you know, is it, you know, scraping work from other artists and giving them credit. I don't use artist names. So I don't say in the style of Van Gogh or in the style of this artist or that artist. I really just try to describe aesthetically what I would want, you know, for my artwork to look like. But when I first started, what I was trying to see if I could do, right, like as far as like how did I get into this, was I wanted to see, could I take something that I do that's analog and actually make it digital first to get into NFTs. So like in this piece here on the left, you can see is woven fabric that I made with like yarn that I spun and dyed. And then on the right, I started to apply filters and try to animate it before AI, right? So I was exploring just using like filters and animation of photographs initially to see if I could create NFT art. And once I got a sense of how that works, I also said, well, I wonder what happened if I take my woven fabric, so like the one on the left, and actually use that as the initial image or the beginning image to then inspire pieces that would have that as like the undertone or the influence in the piece. So all of these three images on the right were based off of the fabric on the left. And I was using words like cityscape, you know, dynamic photography, like all these different things, but it was pulling the structure of the artwork off of this photograph over here. So I started to explore, you know, what would happen if I used my fiber pieces as like the initial image in the creation of the pieces. And conversely, going the other way.
Oh, but I was going to say, it's almost like the seed for like generative art. It's like, as this changes, you can be like, you can run the same prompt and just use a different image of something that's been knitted. I'm just going to use that word.
Exactly.
And it changes
exactly.
based on the physical photograph or the photograph of the physical piece.
Exactly. Yeah. And
that's crazy.
Yeah. And then like this one here. So I would start off with like the AI image, and then I'll take that as inspiration, and then I'll make physical pieces. So like I saw the image on the left was a scarf, and then I used my hand spun yarn to kind of construct it. And, you know, going through, there was like all of these different images that I generated. So these were alternate renders or versions of the scarf that, you know, was coming up as I was like creating them. So you could just kind of see how there were so many different versions and variations before I actually got to the one on the left as an idea.
So, but like that for a fiber artist is like, you're just prototyping. Really, you don't have to like make an entire thing and then be like, maybe it could be bulkier. Like, I'm going to start the whole thing again. You're just like, okay, render this. Okay, I want it bulkier. Maybe you just add that as a keyword, or actually, can you add some pink in there? Oh, that's really cool. Like, that is fantastic, because a lot of people are like, oh, this is the final thing. It's like, yeah, it's not the final thing. I'm like augmenting my own skills with AI here to produce something different, better. And I'm just using AI as part of the process.
Yeah, and why that's important is because as a fiber artist, just to kind of give you an idea, right? I had constructed a shawl. This is like, I don't know, I don't want to say heartbreaking, but it kind of makes me sad. But this is a shawl that I made that was inspired by the Wizard of Oz. And the pattern was designed by a different knitting designer. But what I did was I made all the yarns for it. And when they wrote the pattern, it had nothing to do with the Wizard of Oz, right? So like I came up with that concept to basically superimpose over the pattern. So like where it looks like the yellow brick road, that was the design element that they had, but it wasn't, yellow. It had nothing to do with the Wizard of Oz. So each tier or each section, I like spun the yarn, I dyed the yarn, and I tried to tell the story of the Wizard of Oz in this shawl. So like it started off with like Toto on the top, then there was a rainbow, then I used Shrinky Dinks to make these little charms so that when the wearer wears the shawl, they sway so it looks like the objects in the window, right, that are like blowing around, in the tornado. And so all of this was like a really cool project, but I couldn't submit it into a fiber art show because I was not the original designer. And I'm not a designer, right? Like I don't design knitting patterns. I spin the yarn. I mean, I can, but like that's not my strong suit. I spin the yarn and I dye the yarn and I can come up with creative yarns, but designing wasn't really my thing. So by using AI, I can see a design and then I can go ahead and create something. And now this is my own original creation insofar as I used AI to help me with, coming up with that initial idea.
Yeah. Whew. This is amazing. I love like the in and out of this, like going from AI, physical to AI. Like I'm being challenged right now to be like, well, how do I take that like outside of the computer again? So what like my initial like AI project, like I'm very at the moment in love with nature, especially the sea. Like I love old school naval battles. It's like choppy water, smoke, cannons, fire, that kind of stuff. But I also just love ocean shots, like calm, peaceful. Like I'm like, how do I do more AI kind of stuff with that? I also have a love for coffee, and I'm like, oh, like can I start blending these two things, like coffee on beaches, or people holding coffee cups with amazing backgrounds, or I don't know. Like
you could do coffee stain. So like in your so like okay, so like in your prompts, right? You could say like sepia tone or coffee stained art, and then if you take that out, you can then have like coffee stained paper that you then print the artwork on. So there's lots of different ways that you can play.
Ooh, yeah.
So, like, scratch and sniff art.
Like that. It's like I find a lot of people, even artists, creatives, like who are on the wrong side of AI, it just feels like they haven't explored that far yet or haven't thought about all the implications. Sure, some of it is a little nasty, like the theft of people's artwork, especially if they haven't consented to it. But it's like, yeah, but this can speed up workflows. This can like help us imagine, especially for people, like me who have like very small attention spans, but who are very big on ideas. Or I'm like, cool, let's learn, let's go deep into this. And I'm thinking about kids at school, like, hey, like instead of spending your whole summer like trying to make this one thing for your art project or your school project, like let's prototype a bunch of stuff with AI, and then we then select the best one for you to then make, because then it's fun. Then it's like, yes, I really want to do this.
Yeah, the potential, the potential is amazing. It allows people, I think, to feel capable. It allows them to see their creative potential. It allows them to explore ideas that maybe they had and they didn't, think were executable. So, and it also shows you maybe what are limitations. Like if you have an idea and you test it out in AI and you're like, you know what, I don't think this is what I wanted to do. And in fact, I actually prompted for an installation because I've never done, like I never created a fiber installation in like a museum space before, and I was invited to do
Okay.
that. And so because I was able to prompt for it, I was able to submit these ideas. But then because of the logistics of, you know, how the space is, I then realized that it wouldn't really be an enjoyable thing for me to do. Had I not had that AI, you know, as like a sketch to even get me springboarded, I might have committed to something that, you know, I wouldn't really have been able to visualize what the undertaking would have been to do it. So because of having
Yeah.
that as like an assistant, it actually helped me make a better informed choice of something that I was going to do in the analog sense, right? So it is just really, it is quite amazing.
Yeah, so one, like that, it saved you a bunch of time. It allowed you to say no to
Hmm.
something without committing to
Hmm.
hours. And I am someone who like always tries to like be a man of my word, basically. Like if I say I'll do something, even if it's the worst thing ever, like I will do it. And so if I said like, yeah, hey, museum or exhibition place, I'm gonna do this and it's gonna cost me like 100 hours to do this, and I hated every
Hmm.
single minute of it. Ah, it would like burn me out, or I'd be like scarred for life, you know. But if I'm like, actually, yeah, that was my idea. I'm fine with that. Like I'm okay to say no to the act of creating it or putting it in a museum. But then going back to the kids, like, and the tactility of what you do, like to do something with AI, and especially like with digital art, like I love it. It's nice, it's easy, it's fun. Like I try and make things look gritty and grainy, feel like it's handmade. But then when you actually make something that is handmade and it can hang on a wall, you can feel it. Like it does something. And I think a lot of kids are just losing that completely. Everything's so digital. And so then to
Hmm.
make something and actually feel it, I think that would be super cool for a lot of kids. Like my kid loves making stuff. And then as we get older, somehow we just lose all of that. And maybe it's to
Yeah,
do with confidence
y-
or something else. I don't know.
well, I know for sure I'm definitely losing my ability with penmanship. I noticed that my handwriting is definitely getting worse because of like all of the typing and texting that I'm doing. And with you
Yeah,
doodling, maybe, you know, not so much, right? But and I have, you know, drawn and painted and all of that. So to lose that eye hand motor skill coordination, that's kind of a sad byproduct. But yeah, I think that, you know, in our current day and age, people are being given so many images to compare themselves to,
mm,
you know, be convinced that, oh, if you just buy this product you'll be better, you know, if you just consume this you'll be happy. And you know, there's really a large gap between people seeing that, you know, it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to not have things go right the first time, and there is
I
a
love that.
beauty in learning and struggling, and you know that there are tools that can help you, but like it also can help you grow in getting your hands dirty and, you know, disconnecting and all of that. So I think we really are challenged to find a way to balance the digital, which is amazing, but also the human, you know. And that's why I think I love that analog digital kind of seesaw. Like I like to go back and forth because I feel like the analog grounds me and the digital inspires me to see where I can push the
Well,
next idea and the next
so
thing that I'm going to do.
so I love that it's like a seesaw in your mind, because I can see a lot of schools, a lot of people being like neither. Like they're not doing
Hmm.
stuff with their hands because like that's a hack, but they're not doing stuff with AI or technology because it's too overwhelming, too technical, too advanced. It's like I'm pretty safe right here, just watching Netflix
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
maybe just doing a little bit of digital art. Okay, thank you. You know, it's like, but you're
Yeah,
going
yeah.
between quite like two big extremes. Um, are there any other people who do blend fiber art with AI that you hang out with, that you chat with?
Not yet. As far as I know, I'm the only one. But you
Okay.
know, any rebel that wants to come sit at my table is always welcome.
Do you show any of your fiber artist friends or community the AI stuff that you're doing?
I do, and you know, I've given talks even at like trade shows, just even on how fiber art businesses can incorporate AI into their business practice. But there's such a resistance because I think that, you know, um, there's obviously a lot more people that are opposed to AI, thinking, well, if you're going to depict a crochet pattern and it wasn't, like done by hand, like again, the whole like, morality of using AI applications that maybe are using images as part of their data set from artists that didn't consent to having their artwork as part of it, but also not labeling things as having AI in them. So there's a real pushback from the fiber art community of like wanting to just see things done by hand, not having AI be part of it. Like, so I'm really the black sheep, if you will, in my in my group. But I do have a lot of people that are fans of mine, and they really enjoy seeing my rebel ways, seeing the way that I am bringing things together. And I'd like to think that anyone that has ever done something new and bold has both critics and fans, right? You can't win over people. You can't win over everybody. So I'm just going to keep doing me. I'm going to keep exploring the things that I find interesting. And, I enjoy people that challenge me, because I feel like that just helps me solidify my message that much more, and, have fun, be creative, and just try to leave people, places, and things in better condition than how you found them. That's what I'm trying to do.
Man, that's awesome. So Alanna, I'm going to put up your website here. Guys, go have a look. There's a lot to look at. You can follow her on X, on Instagram. You've got a newsletter. If you're in the New York area, you can attend live classes. You do online workshops. Yeah, there's a lot to take in from Alanna. And I know that we could speak for, like another 2-3 hours. I have so many questions. Like, I'm loving this. Like, there's so many things that I connected with. Got like 2 pages of notes here. But yeah, it's been just over an hour, and you've been an amazing guest. Like, I love learning stuff, and I'm like, I just want to go look at things that are handmade and woven and be like, is this bunny fur or is this cat fur? Like, and people are like, what?
Excellent.
Actually,
if you want, next time, if you want me to come back next time, I can do a burn test with you, and I can show you how you can tell what something is by burning it. So there you go. We can we can bring fire into the equation.
It's like walking through H&M. Yep, this one's definitely cotton. Okay, this one's wool. We're gonna get this one. Great, thank you very much.
You can tell the real from the fake that way.
Yeah, that'd be great. But yeah, thank you so much for being on the show, being on the podcast. It's been great chatting to you. I've loved every minute of it. So thank you.
My pleasure. Cheers. And it's always a pleasure talking to you as well.
All right. I'm going to close this out. Alanna, don't go anywhere. Stay on the line. And I'm going to hit this stop button. Goodbye, you all.